my name's Vivian Ross-Smith. I'm 1/8 of VAU. So Visual Artist Unit is a community interest company that we founded in 2014. It's made up of 8 practicing artists, so there's 7 of us are graduates of Grey School of Art and 1 of us is a graduate of Duncan and Jordanson. So we kind of formed the idea when we were in our final years of art school. We were keen to keep the kind of art school community going, getting that network around you of like-minded people. So we were aware that there's not that much support for emerging artists as they're coming out, so we decided we wanted to keep that together and form something that could basically aim to support emerging artists based in Scotland and get public engagement programmes that go to the wider community. So Pillow Talks is the first in hopefully a long series of artist talks. We're kind of getting the next one on the go, so it's good to see such a good big turnout to this one tonight. So for VAU, we keep up to date over social media. You can keep in contact with us on our website, Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. So if you want to just speak to somebody wearing one of the lovely VAU t-shirts, then we'll tell you some more information and keep you up to date on what's going on. We're currently working out of studios in Crown Point. We offer artist memberships so people can come and kind of skill share, join in with the community and work together. So we're working out of the east of Glasgow at the moment, and we've been doing some member shows, so we're going to do a lot more exhibitions. We've also been working with primary schools in the North Lanarkshire area, putting together kind of social and some public engagement programmes. So that's what we're working on at the moment. So on to tonight, where I've got our artists here, and we're asking them to speak about their emerging years because it's quite important to Visual Artist Unit in general. So first of all, we'll have the Brownlee Brothers. They work collaboratively to put on their degree show and still work as a duo together. So they're living and working out of Dundee at the moment. So graduated from Duncan and Jordanson. Next we'll have Peter Chalmers. So he graduated from Grey School of Art. He also taught there for a few years, couple of years, and that's how we got to know him. He kind of tutored a few of the VAU family. Next of all, we'll be moving on to Toby Paterson. So he's living and working out of Glasgow. Got a vast CV, winner of the.
Did I send you a CV?
We looked it up.
Told you anything about myself.
After that will be David Shrigley, also living and working out of Glasgow. Was of course Turner Prize nominee in 2013. So the setup for the evening will be, we'll just ask each of our artists to talk for 15 minutes. We'll then follow that by 5 minutes of question time from the audience. So once that process has gone through everybody, we'll then have 20 minutes, half an hour of just questions from anybody. It's very relaxed, so just, it's a conversation, so just feel free to chat and talk. Okay, so Fraser and Callum Brownlee first.
I'm Fraser Brownlee.
Hi, I'm Callum Brownlee, and together we collaborate as the Brownlee Brothers. We started collaborating back in 2012 at the end of 3rd year. We both studied and graduated from Duncan Johnson, and as you said, we put a joint degree show on.
Yeah,
that was the kind of first time that we
should work together.
Yeah,
I think we found it quite natural to work together as brothers. So finally, you could edit ideas really quickly, and we're very honest with each other about what ideas were good and what ideas were bad. Sort of bouncing ideas off of each other. We mainly worked in sculpture for our degree show, and still work in sculpture. We quite like the tactile nature of working with different materials, like making objects. And
we've always sort of, as brothers, been into the same things, and we've always kind of been drawn to objects, sort of relics, and looking at
the sanctity of an object, the sort of history of an object.
Yeah.
We're also really interested in sort of motifs used in like Freemasonry, like prison tattoos, gangs.
And this all kind of feeds into our work.
Yeah.
Growing up, as I said, looking at Freemasonry,
We're really interested in the idea of like opposites as well. Like we really like mixing like the sort of the regal with the tacky, and I think what drives us to make new work, like we're really interested in learning new skills and working with new materials. And after our degree show, we had a really good opportunity to go to the Scottish Sculpture Workshop.
Yeah, which is in Lumsden, which is outside Huntly, which is outside Aberdeen. It was a great opportunity.
It's in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, so we could just, after the kind of lull of our degree show,
it was a good opportunity for us to, after art school, you have no access to like a metal workshop, wood workshop, so it was I think it was the most important opportunity we had straight after art school.
Yeah. It's kind of a catalyst to make new work and getting this excitement back to learn how to pour bronze and forge and work with technicians again,
ceramic studio and stuff. So I think that was the most important. Also for networking as well. Like Lumsden seems to be quite a hub for artists, like internationally as well. There was a lot of artists from like Canada and Australia, and it was nice to sort of. Like they were emerging artists as well, so it's quite nice to sort of peg yourself, like, oh, this person in Canada's making this work, and it made us sort of, it was a nice sort of hub for that as well, and also to sort of exchange ideas and skills as well, which when you leave art school, it's sort of, if you're on your own and you feel a bit lost. So I think that was quite an opportunity for us. We still go there. We still
go there now.
We're with there next month as well to make some new work. So I think it's a place that we still use and we still, very passionate about.
Yeah. Whilst we're up there, it was quite nice to have work to deadlines again. I felt that the kind of after graduating kind of relaxed for a wee while, but it was kind of trying to get that energy back and still working to a deadline and pushing yourself, because if you've got deadlines, you have to produce.
Yeah, there are deadlines. So we had
with the Royal Scottish Academy New Contemporary Show back in 2014, which was a selection of 5 art schools. It was graduates from 5 art schools who got the opportunity to show in the Royal Scottish Academy. That was a great honour to be next to same artists. Emerging artists
from around Scotland and stuff, and it was a really good energy. It was quite a big show, and it was quite nice to sort of, everybody was in the exact same boat as we were, just finishing art school and stuff, so it was really, we felt so honoured to be part of that and to be in that atmosphere, and some people that we graduated with were showing work, and it was just a really important time for us as well, and such a good thing to be involved in. It made it seem like it was more plausible, like leaving art school and not just working in the pub full time. It made it feel like this could be tangible. You could do it, and I think you could feel the energy in the room on the opening night.
There as well, we were lucky enough to be awarded the Fleming Wyfold bursary, which just kind of helped it fund more projects that we want to kind of carry on with.
I think that the first thing we did with the bursary was putting money down for a studio. We decided to stay in Dundee. A lot of our friends sort of moved back to Glasgow and Edinburgh, but we have quite, we're born and bred in Dundee.
Proud of Dundee, and we felt, for some reason, we felt that we wanted to stay there and continue making work there.
Yeah, so we put some money down for a studio and also kitted the studio up with some materials and equipment, and just.
It was also the kind of network we had made in Dundee. Dundee's very small.
You get things done quite quickly.
You can get done things quite quickly. So, as you said, working in pubs, we'd met like joiners and welders, glass engravers.
And so we felt like if we moved back to Glasgow, moved to Glasgow or a bigger city, we would lose all these contacts. Like working in pubs through our art school, it's quite funny how you buy somebody a pint and his mate Dave will borrow his welder, or like all these little, I don't know, I think we find that quite important, and also quite enjoy that, meeting new people in the pub as well, and just the weird people that know somebody who's got a scrap metal yard or something like that. I don't know, we've been quite lucky in that respect as well. Also in Dundee we set up the Dundee Print Collective recently.
This is October 2014, so it's quite a new thing. It was basically kind of a discussion with one of the print technicians from the DCA, and you were volunteering there for a while, and kind of felt there was a lack of energy or in young artists or emerging artists. It was quite hard to access this place.
Yeah,
so people tried to open up for.
I think people felt a bit intimidated with the idea of going to the DCA print studio and stuff. So I asked Scott Hudson, the technician there, if we could maybe set something up, and he was more than happy to. We set up the Dundee Print Collective, which is, I think right now it's more than 30 artists.
Yeah, we put an exhibition on in the Wasps just back in December there, and the turnout of people who came and did prints was like over 40, had bands,
performance art and stuff. It was like a really good time to have. I don't know, it felt like a celebration of like the creativity in Dundee. Sort of got us out of the pub and back into the studio, like using our skills for good, not for just blethering around the table. And so we continue to force that as well, and to be part of that. As well as that, we're also making new work for. We were involved with a show through the Fleming Foundation last year, which is called New Scottish Artists. So yeah, we're involved with the show this year.
So we're just going to show maybe a sneak peek of what we've been working on, and kind of that's in mid-May now. So if you're in London, come along.
I think it's open for a month.
Open for a month. We'd like to thank just the VAU for letting us kind of tell us our journey, and we're open for questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So is there any questions for Paterson?
Are you fans of Jessie Ray?
Pardon?
Are you fans of Jessie Ray?
Jessie.
You're going to have to explain now, John.
It's quite a hard one. He's a delightful Scottish singer-songwriter who had a kind of a lot of, I don't know if they were kind of one-hit wonders, because I don't know if they were that famous.
I don't know if I had a hit.
No, but they're kind of, he always kind of dons this kind of battle armour. I think he had a court case where he actually brought his claymore to the court. What was it? How did it pronounce?
I don't know what. I think he was not. He was brought as a witness, I think, possibly, and he came fully donned in his armour with his claymore, and he got put in jail for a couple of days for contempt of court, and they confiscated his claymore. It was a fully functioning.
That's very
No,
good
but-
performance piece there, isn't it?
I'll look him up.
I'll look him
Questions then? Any other ones? No? Okay. So, we'll hear from Peter next, please.
Perfect. As we've been said, I'm Peter. I graduated, it will be 8 years ago this summer. And if I'm honest, I must admit, I still very much believe I'm in my emerging years right now. But 8 years is kind of a bit too much to talk about this evening, so I've decided I'm going to speak largely about the first 2 years out of art school for me. And probably specifically I'm going to talk about a lot of my failures from those first couple of years, because I think looking back, that's when I've sort of actually learned the most from it, even though it's a bit embarrassing and my ego doesn't want me to do that. I think it's probably the most useful thing to do. I'm not necessarily quite sure what kind of split we have of people here, but for maybe anyone who's maybe a few years just behind me, or maybe still a student at art school, maybe the next couple of minutes might be a bit more relevant to you guys. And the first thing I probably want to say is that life after art school is great. Because I remember when I was a student, I met so many people who said, oh, as soon as you leave, it's all downhill and doom and gloom. And I kind of thought it was a little bit sad. And now that I've been out, and that certainly hasn't been my experience, I feel compelled to always tell people that actually it's great, so don't worry about it. And the other thing I would say, if I'm allowed to give a bit of advice that might be useful, is to really celebrate your successes, whatever they may be, whether they seem very small or very big. Celebrate them, because they'll allow you, when possibly situations come along that maybe aren't quite ideal, or maybe you feel that you've had a couple of knockbacks or setbacks, that allow you to keep on going through that, and it also will allow those kind of setbacks, hopefully down the line, to actually be good quality learning for you. So that's kind of been a couple of things I've certainly learned. But my kind of experience as a whole, like I said, is I graduated in 2007, and kind of immediately after graduation, I spent the first couple of weeks in the Isle of Lewis. I'd been invited to be part of an exhibition in Aberdeen called the Gaelic Connection, so I went out there for a little bit, made some work. And once the work and the show was together for that, I moved, or I spent the rest of the year 2007, I spent in Florence in Italy on the John Kinross Scholarship through the RSA in Edinburgh. And that actual experience, it was just over 3 months, maybe getting close to 4 months. I don't want to get all sort of really over egg it, but it was a genuinely sort of transformative experience for me, and it fueled my practice, certainly for the first few years out of art school. But even now, the work I'm doing now, I still look back, and some of the work I looked at when I was there, some of the things I thought about, and it sort of still seems relevant. So if anyone has the opportunity to apply for that residency, I personally would recommend it. Again, there's probably not, I don't really want to say too much more about it actually, because that's probably a whole talk in itself. So I'll probably just leave that one there. But 2008 came along, and actually the start of 2008 was the first time that kind of after art school that I had nothing in the diary. I was kind of open, so if something was going to happen, I had to make it happen. And I decided to sort of fulfill a sort of childhood ambition to move to London. So I moved myself down right at the start of the year, and I get on the job hunt. And I didn't necessarily move down. I wouldn't say I moved down to London feeling particularly confident, but you know, I had a degree that I'd worked very hard for, and I was quite proud of it actually. And I'd been on the Kinross, and I was very fortunate that my degree show had been included in sort of a national magazine that mentioned sort of people graduating that year in the UK. So if I wasn't confident going down to London, I did feel a bit hopeful. But I arrived, and I started applying for jobs, and I got nothing. I kept applying. Weeks went past, kept applying, not even an interview, literally nothing. And that's when the advice of look at, you know, hold on to those successes. You know, you need that, because it started to sort of get me down a little bit. And it was at that time that the National Gallery actually, it was becoming a bit of a home for me. I almost went in there daily. And a sort of funny thing can happen, I probably should say, is I dressed a bit differently than I do now at that time. I sort of wouldn't have got out of bed unless I was wearing a shirt and tie. And quite often, when I was at weekends in galleries or shops or things, people would confuse me for being staff there. And this happened at the National Gallery quite often. People would come up to me and they'd be like, oh, where's your Rembrandts or whatever. And initially I would apologise, I know I don't work here, and they'd get embarrassed, I'd get embarrassed, we'd all get embarrassed together. It would be terribly awkward. But as the weeks went on, I knew, you know, I got some of the collection really well. I sort of thought, oh gosh, well I'll just tell them, I know where these things are. So people, you know, they would come up and be like, where's the lever? I know, absolutely, I was. And people were like, where's this? So I was like, oh, it's Dread's the room or whatever. And you know, sometimes actually if they asked me where certain things were that I hadn't seen for a while, I thought, oh, well, heck, I can't see that myself, so I'd walk along with them and we'd have a look. And the funny thing was I'd actually applied to a number of jobs at the National Gallery as invigilators and things, not curators. I knew I couldn't do that, but as invigilators. And they'd given me, you know, again, never gave me an offer, and certainly hadn't even given me an interview. And I remember thinking at the time, I could get in touch with them and say, I'm kind of doing the job anyway, you should start paying for it. But I didn't. The funniest one though, I must say, was a couple came up to me once. It was a man and a woman, and the guy happened to be in a wheelchair, and they said, do you have disabled access to your restaurant? And I knew in the same room they've got an elevator that takes you down, so I sort of remember saying to them, yes, we do. So I took them along, took them in the elevator down to the restaurant, and I remember the face of the lady who worked at the reception. She, at the front of the house in the restaurant, sort of looked at me with a sort of funny face and sort of smiled, and I sort of left and walked on. So that was that. And Actually, not too long after that, even though I'd been down in London for several weeks by now, probably actually technically months by now, I eventually did get a job working in an office actually for the NHS. And if I'm perfectly honest, I loved it. I really, really loved it because it gave me access to kind of a part of life that I didn't really know anything about. And it paid my bills, it covered my cost, and I did my 9 to 5, and it allowed me to draw and paint all evening. And at weekends I was uptown in museums and galleries. And I must admit, I felt like I lived pretty good then. I lived simply, but I felt like I lived really good and lived really well. And I actually, again, I look back on that kind of period. I kind of worked there for about, probably coming up to about a year. And I do look back on it as a period actually, which was, again, sort of some of the best learning I did, because I had the time and the space with no deadlines unless I gave deadlines to myself. Unless I submitted for things, I had the time and the space to kind of work out what it was that I wanted to do, what it was that I did at art school, what went on there, what I learned, what the work that I made there was actually about rather than what I thought it was about, and to decide if I wanted to carry on making things, which I knew very, very simply that I did. And I must admit, actually, that kind of lifestyle, even now, I sort of pine back for it a little bit. So that was my time in London. And then, again, not long after that, kind of like I said, I've been in London maybe a year and a half by then. Through a friend, I heard of an opportunity in Paris. There was a residency came up, and they asked, if I wanted to consider applying for it. So I emailed all my information and details and statements, etc., off to them. Ever hopeful, and I heard back actually not long after that they decided that they were going to give it to me. Which was quite exciting at the time, and actually that period, that sort of getting that residency, which was initially meant to be 3 months and then becoming a year, that was actually kind of the turning point, actually, I would say, whereas it seemed like the first chunk of time after art school was quite difficult. Things didn't seem to kind of go my way, so to speak. From then on, that was going to change, and kind of the last 6 years since then, I've been very fortunate. I've had quite a number of great opportunities which have come my way, which I think I've taken advantage of, or tried to anyway. And yeah, the wide-eyed boy who moved down to London trying to see what could happen 8 years later gets to sit in a panel with these great people and share the stories. So yeah, like the Brownlee said, thank you to the VAU team for inviting me to speak, and I'm sure that's probably my time. There's plenty. Is it? Of course it is. They know me awful. I could just talk about it, but there's plenty more embarrassing stories. But I think I'll save my ego. I think that's enough.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks.
So, any questions for Peter from the audience?
So we were just having a conversation before we started and we didn't manage to complete it, so if I just carry on. So I know you were saying you've recently just moved down here. Yeah. What was the impetus for that?
Well, it was actually, I just spent the last couple of years teaching at Gray's in Aberdeen, and it was a fantastic experience. I loved it, but it got to a point where my contract for that came to an end, and I had this point where I suddenly, again, became free and had to decide what do I actually want to do now, what next, what I want to try and make happen. And I'm a bit of a big city boy at heart, and I must admit, I do adore Aberdeen, it's kind of my home, but I kind of felt like I needed a new adventure, basically. So there's quite a lot of great things going on in Glasgow. I know quite a few people here, and I didn't really know the city that well, so I thought let's see what could happen. And funnily enough, Laura, who's one of the VAU members, she just got a residency in Aberdeen. Something I actually did a few years ago myself, where I first met them. I knew that she was going to be leaving her studio for a year, so I thought maybe I could sublet that and rent that. So that's suddenly, yeah, I had a flat sorted and my studio sorted. So it suddenly all kind of came together. So.
Well done, welcome.
Nice to meet you. Thank you. Yeah.
Do you feel like your time as teaching influenced your work at all?
Oh, definitely. I ended up making a lot less work because I became so critical of it. I would hear myself, what I said to some of my students, I would start applying to my own work and I'd be like, this is dread, like why even bothering? So I ended up, I didn't make as much work. But I think yeah, I think there was other good things as well, because I think being back in that kind of academic environment, actually, it's something I probably had, if I didn't know it, I probably had missed for whatever it was, the 6 years maybe after graduating, and to go back in there suddenly, although I was maybe more critical of my work, I think it suddenly became a bit better informed, actually. I think I did actually raise the bar of myself, and I think other people kind of expect that of me as well. So I think overall probably has been quite good, quite useful.
Get to use all the facilities and everything.
Well, exactly. I know I'm going to do that because that's the thing when I first went. I know when I first went to London, actually, that was the first thing. My work, I build a lot of things, and so like one of the first things I did was I went off to B&Q and got my sort of. I probably can't advertise B&Q, but I got my power tool, my jigsaw, and all sorts. So it's the same thing again here. Maybe I don't know if we have facilities, but I'll need to.
We'll share about.
There you go. So yeah.
So is there any more questions for Peter? Can we move on to Toby next?
I've got kind of, in being invited to do this, I should say, I graduated from the painting department at Glasgow School of Art 8 years ago. That kind of 20 years ago for me this summer. It's absolutely terrifying prospect. It's even longer for him. And I looked out, this invitation made me kind of start of the year kind of reorganising the studio, and I hadn't done any of that for about 3 years, and I was going through lots of stuff and piles of crap anyway, and I thought, well, I'm going to dig out, see what I can dig out of kind of funny old images, and this is basically, is there any chance we could stop that spooling through?
Yeah.
Because I had a slightly kind of chronological thing, because if I talk without a prompt of images, then it would just ramble on horrifically. Can I do the terrible sort of clay pigeon shooting thing and ask you to move the slide on when to say next, please? That's why. But basically, yeah, so I graduated in 1995. I think much the same as anyone kind of finishing up. I think the night the degree show was spent sort of sitting on the curb outside the Vic Bar in Garnet Hill weeping. And it did get better shortly thereafter. I was lucky in that I fell in with a good group of people. I mean, it's interesting hearing you guys, how you guys work together in an art school context. Sort of in with a good group of people. When I was there, we collaborated on doing a couple of exhibitions together, and those kind of things continued after art school. Along with all of this, I found this ridiculous image. I think this is from about 1999 or thereabouts, maybe 98, pre-Optimo Halloween party. And this is kind of what my 20s felt like. So yeah, spent more effort doing stupid stuff like this than actually making any work. But yeah, next image please. My degree show, I was kind of quite sad when I came across this. I didn't even realise I still had these photos, but that's in a space that doesn't exist anymore, top of the Macintosh building. So as you see, my degree shows, but very much kind of straight up painting. I'd spent some time on an exchange in Chicago in 1993, which had been my complete, that was the life changer in terms of an experience of a city, again, a big city, amazing music scene. I was skateboarding a lot at the time. That was just age 19, just the world completely opened up for me. And that all fed into what I did for my degree show. Next slide, please. Which was kind of, if we were to cut a man-heavy panel here, and that's basically continuing a tradition of sort of what happened when I was in art school. I had a kind of general kind of bunch of bunch of characters, not many of whom are still making work, some of whom are, but all of whom I think are doing kind of quite interesting things. This was a daft photo that we had taken just before our degree show, this kind of loosely affiliated group of people, and I should say across a lot of different departments. There's folk from environmental art, fine art photography, sculpture and painting in our crew. And one of them, the guy with the bleach blonde hair has disappeared, Ian Dickinson. I haven't seen him for a very long time, but he was determined that he was going to be, essentially the next Saatchi generation. He was going to get first. He was going to start working with Jay Jopling. Boom, off it would go. So he had this joke that I think he was actually quite serious about this shop on Bath Street called Glasgow Goldsmiths, because Goldsmiths was obviously the place at the time where all the YBAs had come out of. So this was we all thought it was a joke. I think Ian was taking it quite seriously, but we had this kind of funny portrait taken. Next slide, please. Summer after I graduated, a really big element and what makes the landscape so totally different for a lot of recent graduates now and people trying to establish themselves is the amount of debt that you're in when you come out of art school. I was there there were barely any grants left, but I was able to work and actually save money, and I saved enough money to go back to the States for the summer after I graduated, which kind of helped me get my act together a bit and gather a lot of other ideas and things. I wasn't making any work when I was there. I was there for 3 months. But it kind of expanded my experience further. Next image, please. Came back to this world. Skip on again, please. We need to dwell on that. And ended up in... when was that? That would have been the spring after we graduated. Our group from art school had kind of shaken down quite a bit, and there ended up being a core of us who'd been kicking around the idea of having an artist group, which ran under the name of Filthy Swan for a couple of years, sort of towards the end of art school, and that kind of continued afterwards. But after graduation, as various people kind of dropped off the map a bit, it really kind of condensed into a fairly kind of tight group of people. And in the spring of '96, we were asked to put a show together at Transmission Gallery, which was kind of my sort of, we'd go to Transmission occasionally when we were at art school. I think the links between sort of galleries and institutions in the city are kind of much stronger with the art school now than they were at the time. Transmission was a sort of slightly exotic thing that was happening over there when we were actually studying. But we got invited in. We did this kind of pretty ramshackle show, which was really good fun, and probably sort of rubbed people up the wrong way, but that's the point when you're at that stage. But it introduced us to actually trying to do things kind of properly on a slightly more, I hesitate to use the word professional, but kind of capable scale. We did get in lots of trouble from various people on the committee for just being really slack and not paying attention to what we were doing, so a lot got learned. This is my friend Gary Ruff, who now lives in New York and is the only one of our crew, as far as I'm aware, who's actually still making any work. The irony of this is, I think, well, David knows Gary. If you want a good time, you're probably not going to phone Gary Ruff. Depending on what sort of good time you want. That's Paul Nesbitt, who runs Invalid House in Edinburgh. Next image, please. Could we skip on one more? And through Paul, we were offered, for example, a show together at Edinburgh College of Art, sort of in the sculpture court, which was a similar kind of format to the show at Transmission. Just really kind of all of us making our work individually, but talking about it, and really sort of being kind of quite critical, but having kind of good fun at the same time. And everybody's work was very different, and Gary put a roundabout in the middle of the gallery, and I did a big wall painting by the airport that I'd dreamt up. So there was quite a lot of kind of diverging stuff going on, but it was it was good fun. And this actually kind of marked really this was pretty much the end of that couple of years of working as a group. Could we skip back just 1 second? And this is something I came across as flicking through the transmission book recently, which is really weird. It's a point at which the things in Glasgow really were kind of on an uptick. When I was studying the whole sort of Douglas Gordon, Christine Borland, sort of Roddy Buchanan, Ross Sinclair, that sort of generation was really starting to get a bit of traction and had a big influence on me, not so much in the work that I was making, but more in an approach to things and a certainty that I didn't want to make my work in the pattern that was being impressed on me by the painting department at Glasgow School of Art at the time. And that really kind of continued on to an affinity with Transmission Gallery, and I eventually was asked to join the committee there, which again was probably another fairly major turning point. I worked on the committee there alongside some really great people, many of whom are artists now, but many of whom have gone on to become curators and writers. I learned probably more there than I've learned anywhere else. There are mistakes I look back on and they actually keep me awake at night, how sort of stupid and naive I was about how to handle myself and about how to approach things, but it's very important to do that. And yeah, we got visited by Newsweek at one point, which I'd forgotten all about until I was kind of flicking through the transmission book recently. Next image, please. And again. In the meantime, while I was working at Transmission, I was in the committee there from 96 to 98, and was desperate to try and sort of stop working in my rubbishy part-time job. So through really skills I'd learned at Transmission, I started getting work installing shows at places like CCA and Tramway, and at that point when the CCA was in the McClellan Galleries, and I gradually got a little bit more sort of responsibility, I suppose, and was involved in doing things like, for example, this is installing a Liam Gillick wall painting, and I think about 1998. So that kind of work, and when Glasgow became City of Architecture and Design in 1999, European City of Architecture and Design, I managed to get quite a lot of work through that allowed me to really give up my part-time job in a sort of rubbish bookshop on Byres Road and work pretty much permanently within, for want of a better word, the art world. And next image, please. And simultaneously with that, the Modern Institute started, now just along the street from here, but it was a very kind of, when it started nobody really knew what it was, and I was really lucky to be asked to do something towards the end of 1998, just after all the kind of Filthy Swan artist group stuff had really wound down. And I've worked with them ever since. It's not necessarily the ticket to massive prosperity that I think a lot of people think it is working with the Modern Institute, but that said, I would number working with them as one of the main reasons why I'm actually sitting here talking to you as a reasonably functioning artist. The support and the kind of moral support is kind of extraordinary, knowing that it's essentially becoming part of another gang, and that kind of network is a vital thing. And that's a funny photograph taken during my first show there, October '98 it was. I'm about to run over, so I'll wind up in a couple of minutes. Next image, please. At the same time as that was starting to get moving, and I was starting to get a little bit of confidence working on my own without without my art school friends around me. I was very lucky to get to be asked to get involved in a project alongside the artist Graham Fagan, who some of you probably know, in the Royston Road area of Glasgow. They were developing 2 parks at either end of Royston Road, one in kind of Proven Mill, which is this one here, and one on the top of Royston Hill. So I kind of it was the first piece of public art that I ever got involved in. Funny one for a painter to start moving in this direction, but I'd long had an interest in architecture. It seemed to make sense, and it was a really positive experience. Apart from the point at which the locals burned down the community centre, that concrete slab in the background used to be where we'd have our community group meetings to discuss the development of these 2 parks. And I turned up one day for a meeting and it was gone and it had been burned down. So that was, on one hand, you talk about sort of working with the NHS. It's straight into another world, and you're in a completely different milieu. And I learned an awful lot from that, and it was hugely rewarding. Plus, it paid me enough to really start thinking to establish a studio just on King Street around the corner here, above the funny hairdressers Greens. I had this weird upstairs room and they used to lock me in every night. So that was kind of around 1999, and that was really the start of actually kind of getting it together. And the final image, please. And really the big thing in terms of exhibiting and gaining confidence around that was, and it's one of the many reasons I feel I have a debt of gratitude to Dundee, was Gina Brown asked me to be involved in a group show early in 2001 called Beyond, and it was the first really kind of large-scale work that I'd made specifically for a gallery space. And really from that point on, I just, inevitably there are ups and downs, but I've been very lucky. Now this will be my 15th year of not having a proper job. Yeah, that's probably me. So thank you. Filthy Swan were the aforementioned Gary Ruff, who is still a practicing artist, and is actually, after about a decade of not getting a lot of traction, is actually doing quite well now. Robert Johnson, who's since changed his name to Robert Dallas Gray. Scott Waugh, who's still painting, I think has a studio at Wasps in East End. Ian Dickinson, who's vanished off the face of the earth. It was a very funny guy from Barnsley, really smart. Yeah,
was he really
good.
vanished, or just?
I've not seen him for 10 years or more.
Vanished from your life? Or?
Vanished from my life. Well, I mean, he's vanished from my life. That essentially he's vanished. No, I haven't seen him for a long time. No, I don't mess with Facebook. So, but he ended up getting a job in the financial services industry. So he's probably kind of, shamefacedly crying into his body tints, whatever it was he used to drink.
Jeff Koons.
He's going to re-emerge with his Roger Hargreaves paintings. So that was the kind of core. And Dougie Payne, who went on to be in a successful band. He's now really wealthy. He's the one that actually really succeeded. Yeah. So that whole thing that everyone tells you about art school, you don't go to art school to be an artist, go to art school to get in a band and make lots of money. It's kind of true in his case, but so that was the group, and then a couple of people sort of jumped on the edges later on, but yeah, it's good. It worked well, and I think it's the classic thing of art schools. You learn a lot more from your peers than you're ever going to learn from your tutors, and the imperative to have some kind of network that you feel kind of hooked into in some way. And, as you go on with an artist, that network maybe becomes more widely spread and maybe are working with galleries internationally, but it's still a network and it's still people that you can feel are supporting you and that you can talk to about what you're doing. So yeah, it's essential.
So have you found Glasgow quite a supportive city to live and work in then?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, I'm from Glasgow, and oddly, one of the motivations behind working, some of the ways that I work was to get excuses to get the hell out of Glasgow, because certainly, when I was younger, it was not somewhere I really wanted to be. But really, since graduating and gaining a perspective on how this city works, it's really, really great. And it's incredible, sort of fairly miserable Tuesday night to have this many people coming out to sort of talk about this, and the scene, for want of a better term, in the kind of 15 years that I've been pretty much dedicated to doing this is doubled, possibly tripled. I don't know, it's extraordinary, the number of people. But it's also down to me becoming middle-aged and having a family, and I don't go out anymore. So when I actually eventually do make it out to something, I'm like, Jesus Christ, how many people are there? So, but yeah, it's good, and the kind of the affordability of being here, relatively speaking, the resources, there's great work being made. I'm here for the duration.
So have you got any more questions?
Where did the name Glasgow from?
Oh gosh, I think it came from when you could still. I think it came from the Vic Bar, former Vic Bar at the art school, and somebody had 2B pencil and was just absent-mindedly colouring in a packet of Swan Vesta matches. I think I was the only one of them that didn't smoke, so they definitely weren't my matches. And it was just an idle comment. Someone said that Swan's absolutely filthy. One of the motivations was behind it was kind of a completely stupid idea that we thought and I look back at it now and I realise it was really exposing our sort of anxieties and our lack of confidence, that we thought we're not going to be able to operate individually as artists. It just seemed like an impossible gradient to climb. So we kind of banded together, and the notion came up again, probably in the pub, that maybe we should run it on the model of being like a band rather than being like a group of individual artists, which of course we were. And we made the odd kind of collaborative work. I mean, I did some stuff with Robert Johnson, and he made a kind of really funny sort of spoof. It was actually quite morosely funny sort of spoof pop video with Gary, and so there was that sort of stuff going on. And it just sounded like it was a good band name.
That's definitely a good band name, isn't it?
And then it turned out actually years later, there's a crew of, they're now spread far and wide, but there's a crew of young skateboarders from Carluke who had a kind of, I don't know whether they knew about it or not, and I've never spoken to any of them, I just wanted to let it be. They had a little crew called Dirt Swan, which its logo was the traditional cock and balls with a pair of wings that they used to go around sort of tagging places, and I felt like there was a little bit of the spirit of Filthy Swan sort of still alive. Anyway, sorry, enough of that.
Right, will we pass on to David then?
So this is chronological order, isn't it? Going back the way. Disappointing. I'm oldest in Paterson, was long, and I graduated in 1991, which doesn't seem that long ago, but it was a lot, apparently 24 years ago. I grew up in the Midlands, and I moved to Glasgow in 1988, and I went to the Glasgow School of Art, which seemed really exotic compared to Leicester Polytechnic, where I did my foundation course. So yeah, I thought Glasgow School of Art just seemed really exciting at the time, and we had a tutor when I was doing my foundation course who was a graduate of the art school here, and he basically said you can apply to study at Glasgow School of Art into the second year, and that wasn't something that people did at the time. So myself and two other friends, we both got into environmental art, and yeah, we were kind of the English people at the art school, if you can believe that. There were hardly any English people at the art school. So we were quite exotic, we were foreigners. And we were all from Leicester as well, which was really strange. So yeah, we had a really good time at art school. We in those days there was no student loans. You got a grant. There were 11 people on my course in environmental art, and we had an annex building called the Girls' High School, which was a sort of heated, lit ruin that we could do whatever we wanted in. And yeah, I think my studio was probably about the size of this room, and it had a rope swing in the middle of it. And yeah, we asked about a lot and had a really good time. And then I graduated and got a 2-2 and was furiously angry because got the Desmond. And yeah, so I was quite bitter about that. And then I decided that people didn't understand my genius course. So I decided to become a cartoonist because I thought that would piss David Harding off. And yeah, so I became a cartoonist. And because I thought, yeah, you know, I'm not supposed to have a sense of humour, so I'll just do whatever I want to do. And but so I started publishing books because this was in the days before the internet and stuff like that, and the mobile phone. And yeah, we sent faxes to each other and stuff on thermal paper. Look it up. So I graduated, and I decided that to hell with what I perceived to be the art school, which was really just David Harding and Sam Ainsley at the art school, who were my teachers at the time. You know, your view of what the art world is when you graduate is just your tutors, and that's it, basically. And at that time, there was no precedent for anybody making a living as an artist. There was no YBA at that time. Damien Hirst had only graduated maybe 2 years before that. So I guess it was, there just was no precedent for making a living as an artist, unless you were a figurative painter with a big moustache. And you just, you know, people like, I guess, like Stephen Campbell and Adrian Wisniewski and those figurative painters were the golden boys of the generation before, and they were the people who were sort of making money, and I was just like, well, I can't paint, so I'll be a cartoonist instead. And I think I'd seen Gary Larson, which was quite popular at the time, so I was like, I'll do something a bit like Gary Larson, even though I didn't really like cartoons and comic books, but I decided to publish my silly drawings, and I fell in with some Satanists who had a shop on Bank Street, the road that Jim Lambie lives on. Yeah. There was a shop called Black Rose, and they published an occultist, those guys, an occultist journal, and a Mark Bolan fanzine, and my books, my first 2 books.
And sublime to the ridiculous.
Yeah. So anyway, so they were kind of friends of friends, and so I was using their photocopier and making a couple of books. I think I used those books as a sort of publicity vehicle, so I sent them to people, sent them to, what's his name, Ian Hislop at Stripe Eye. Yeah, sent me a pro forma letter back, It's basically saying that the work is A, rubbish, B, not suitable, whatever. It just ticks boxes. So anyway, I didn't really have any success as a cartoonist per se, but then after a while I decided that I kind of liked making books and I liked what I was doing, so I continued to do it, but stopped sending it to Private Eye and Punch, and these, all of whom rejected the work, obviously. And then, so then I sort of became the guy in the art world, because this was at the time that Transmission started, and I hung around there. Basically, I was the guy that filled that gap of making books and funny drawings, and I was the guy that did that rather than did what, I don't know, Christine Borland did, shooting apples and things. That group of people were very sort of nurturing. And Toby Webster was on the committee, who's Mr. Modern Institute, and Katrina Brown was on the committee at that time, and Douglas Gordon. I mean, the landscape was very different. Douglas didn't have any tattoos then, and he was like thin and had hair, and he didn't take drugs. And he was really clean living. So it was a totally different world. Yeah. And Douglas was the first person to do well, I guess, out of our group. In fact, maybe Callum Innes was actually the first person. Callum Innes was the first person who was nominated for the Turner Prize, I think, and then Douglas after that. So anyway, I made books, made funny books, and still made sculptures. I worked in community education with prisoners and mentally disabled people and NEDs and people like that. And I was a film extra. I was in Trainspotting. Were you in Trainspotting? Everybody was in Trainspotting.
No, I wasn't. I don't know what the hell I was doing.
Everybody was in Trainspotting.
I think my wife was in Trainspotting.
And numerous other things, Taggart and all that stuff.
Yeah, that was the lucrative, the Taggart.
Everybody was in Taggart. What goes around comes around. So yeah, I worked at the CCA. I was a gallery guide. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I was a gallery guide. I used to install the exhibition really badly. And yeah, that was that. So I was sort of involved in the art world, but then and wasn't really taken very seriously, and was probably I think I was in 2 group shows and made a few works, and then because the people that were on the committee in the Transmission really liked what I did as because my books were funny and nobody else was really funny. So I engendered a lot of goodwill, so they gave me a solo exhibition at the Transmission, which at the time was like amazing. It was like, it was...
Map of the Sewer.
Yeah, it was called Map of the Sewer. It's a rather pretentious title, but, and that was for me, that was like the most amazing. This was 1995, and then I was on the cover of Freeze magazine like a few months later, and everybody was like Jonathan Monk, who I lived with at the time, was like, how on earth did that happen?
He was really pissed
How did
off.
that happen? This Jonathan was like, Mr. Art World. And just by sort of coincidence, like I got some commission to do a book with somebody, and the guy that was the editor wrote for Freeze, and he was just like, yeah, it's amazing work. And then wrote an article in Freeze. And then I was on the cover of Freeze, and then I was famous, and that was it. And that really is the time period that I suppose we're addressing here. And it just happened completely by accident. And then, sort of oddly, it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way at that time, because Freeze was so, I don't really know what kind of status it has now, but at the time it was sort of, like if you're in a band, being on the cover of the NME kind of thing, but I suppose paper journalism isn't so important now, but it was important, it was like being on the One Shot. It was that amazing. And then because after that, Stephen Friedman Gallery, who I show with, suddenly everybody knew who I was. And, or they pretended to have been following my work for years, even though, unless you came to some group show, in our flat, you'd have never seen it, or bought one of the books that I published
Or
myself.
stolen it out of transmission, that's what normally happened.
Yeah, I mean, there were only 4 outlets that actually sold my books, transmission being one. So yeah, I had a real moment, and that changed everything for me. And then suddenly, 6 months later, I gave up work at the CCA, and I was making a living and travelling the world and selling work, which was, I was just like, how did that happen? But it did, And I think sometimes it happens like that for some people, and sometimes it's a slower process, I suppose. I mean, I think Jim Lambie had the same experience in a way. Like, he did a show at Transmission, and then suddenly he was just like, a year later, he was in New York doing a solo show. So it was it's a curious trajectory, but it was a long time ago now. It was 20 years ago that I was on the cover of Freeze, which is frightening, but there it is. Is that it?
Thank you. So have you got questions? I suppose we can kind of just open up questions to an open discussion, so if anybody has any.
I'm intrigued about, I was doing this recently with my own work, actually looking back at my portfolio I had to do to first time I applied to art school, and just seeing how horrific it was at the time. So I'm just intrigued to see what you've studied. Have you done that recently at all? You look back at your work from back when you were at maybe first year at art school or whatever, and what you think, maybe what you thought
This hasn't changed.
My parents actually destroyed all my art. Things ended up back at my parents' house, and they destroyed it. And it's only in recent years that they've realised that was a terrible mistake. And also it was it was prior to digital format. So I found a box of slides in my studio that were all mouldy. I had to throw them away. So in a way, I think most of the work from Degree Show exists only in here, and it doesn't look that good in here. I think that some things I did when I was 25 were all right, but the book that I published in 1995, which was the first book that somebody else published, other than me and the Satanists kind of thing. I hate that book now, and it's still in print, and the people that publish it sort of insist on reprinting it, and I keep demanding that they stop.
Which one was that?
It's called So yeah, I think my way was worse then. It's better now.
Yeah, I think my parents are probably quite a big factor in this, because my parents moved house about 4 or 5 years ago, and that required, that required me dealing with the legacy, the whole childhood thing, and of course after I graduated, everything that I'd saved from art school went back into their basement, and yeah, there was some real crap there. But also stuff that you like, God, that's awful, and then you realise it's not really my fault that it was awful. The project was awful, and we were kind of forced into a position where we had to do this. And life drawing was very pertinent to what you've been up to lately. No, I was pretty bad. I mean, I could have got much better, but I just didn't really care, and I didn't have. I've got a different kind of concentration from that. So finding the life drawings was absolutely hilarious, and then they all got thrown away. But my mum's kind of different, I think, in that she's kind of accumulated vast amounts of nonsense that I've produced over the years. So it's really sweet, but there is still, I really weeded it out because it then all came to me and I had to store some of it. But then there's some things I did, some drawings I did that I kind of still stand by, and that weird thing that I look at and go, God, I was better at drawing when I was 20 than I am now. So, yeah, some good, some not so good.
It's funny, most of the work I've ever done has actually still been sort of stored away. I'm embarrassed to say, but my grandparents' house has got things stored, my parents' house has got things stored, there's stuff down here. Some of it, yeah, I mean, I do look back on it and I really do cringe, and I did have a period of time where I actually started destroying work that I didn't like, but I also, at the same time, every piece that I regard as a bit of a breakthrough, no matter how rubbish it was and dreadful it was, looking back, and every piece that I felt was a bit of a breakthrough for me developmentally, I've actually kept, with the exception of one which I sold, and I really want it back actually. But so yeah, I'm slightly mixed. There's some real skeletons in there, but I'm not going to talk about that.
Yeah, our mum's in the process of moving house right now, not all of our...
Yeah, we just always get texts saying, I found another pile of drawings under your bed.
I got a text recently that said something like, I don't know if it's artwork or rubbish. She's like, is this artwork? And it's like a scrunched up bit of pillow. It's just a big mound of stuff that I'm sure
So listening
will
to
all
that,
get binned. Yeah.
like, should we keep some of it?
I remember in art school, Graham Fagan was our tutor in 4th year, and whenever we were sort of like writing down ideas, sketches and stuff, we'd never like keep them in a sketchbook. They would just be in this pile in the corner, and he was like, boys, this is important, you need to have this all filed. And we're like, but we've made the sculpture, this is like, so he sort of drilled it into us to keep all our bits of paper and like receipts with like really shitty drawings on the back and stuff. But yeah.
We've become hoarders as well, like we have our own sketchbooks and we have like a joint sketchbook, and it's just like sticks so much on it, and you just put it in a cupboard and not look at it for a couple of years, and then bring it out and go, what's in here actually?
Yeah.
Sketchbooks are an important thing to keep, I think.
Yeah,
you need to look back and see how you've progressed.
But it's quite funny because it's all the life drawings and stuff that we've kind of got from
they're all
first.
My gran calls that like the real art. Like,
Why
don't you paint anymore?
It's funny to look back on and go, oh my God, what did I do?
Yeah. Or my gran going, yeah, like that's a lot better than you're doing now. I mean, Dundee, but like when I was in college, my paintings then, she's like.
It's funny you mentioning your mum not knowing the difference between whether it was artwork or rubbish, but there was a number of times in Grace when I was teaching there even before that you'd come in the morning and you notice the cleaners, bless them, had been in and put student work in the bin by the time they got into the skip and put the bins back. Dusted it off.
Happened to all of us, that definitely.
It's
Keith
amazing.
Don't clean in the green space. Everything is easy.
I'll tell you the story about the dead rat.
No.
That's the story about rubbish as well. I made a dead rat, a taxidermy dead rat, and I sent it to my gallerist in Copenhagen, and he had it on his desk. And my idea was he was just about to go to the Basel Art Fair, and that you'd have this dead rat on the floor, and there'd be all these, New York socialites looking at the dead rat, trying to find it. How much is the dead rat? I imagine these scenarios. But anyway, he had it on his desk, and then he came in the next day and it was gone. And the cleaning lady had thrown it away. And she sort of thought, ooh, better not tell him. The rat's died on his desk. So actually they said, well done, that this was the fact, and this is what had happened. And they sort of said, no, it's okay, we understand, but where is it? And it was like in the dumpster up the back. So there's like 4 kind of...
So it had an authentic palm?
So there's these 4 people in the dumpster looking. And they're all dressed like gallery people.
Yeah.
They're all in their kind of cashmere sweaters. And they're like, some guy comes out and says, what do you do? Like, we're looking for a rat. Anyway, yes.
She's still got a funny scenario out of it.
Yeah. This is a thin line between art and rubbish. So it really is. It's interesting that the art is your parents' view of the art when you leave art school versus your view of the art versus when it leaves your studio. You know, I'm always amazed that, you know, when you have that, when you're making something and you're just sort of chucking it around and putting coffee on it and things, and as soon as it leaves the studio, there's some person employed at a museum to wear white gloves and take photographs. And then when the rat is an actual rat, before it becomes art, there's that moment as well.
We could do a whole talks.
Rubbish.
So, yeah.
There was a few mentions from panel members about remembering the time when grants were available rather than taking out loans and what have you. And I think personally that's quite important, or was back in the day. And I think the funding mechanism now is, I just wondered what the panel thought about how that would influence the outcomes from art college and individual outcomes too, and maybe if there are alternatives for the future. Because I don't see the outcomes after your time at art college as necessarily being commercially viable to be able to pay back big grants and big loans, so that must influence the people that are coming into art schools as well. And I just wondered what your thoughts were around that.
I think it's kind of, in a way, like paying back your student loan is the least of your worries. Trying to get a mortgage, that would be the hardest. I think the student loans would be a drop in the ocean versus the, you know, ultimately, I don't know if that would make you feel better about it, but it seems like a frightening amount of money, I think, when you leave art school. But yeah, I think you have to be positive about it and think that it's you know, you will make some money in your life, and it's quite, you know, an idiot like me can make money, and then anyone can as an artist. So I've always felt that, you know, when I left art school, I didn't have a studio, I didn't have a job, I didn't have anywhere to make work, I didn't have the means to make anything. And in a way, that's why I ended up making the work that I made, that's in sort of self-publishing and making drawings, because I could work at home, because I could spend 2 days a week or 3 days a week doing it, and the rest of the time doing whatever I had to do. So, yeah, I mean, it's daunting, and it's definitely, I feel great sympathy for the students that I speak to now when I'm teaching at the art school. But I think you do have to be resourceful as an artist, and I don't think there's going to be big funding for the arts anytime soon. That's not going to change in the near future. But I think one does have to be resourceful. But then again, you know, when I graduated from art school, there was no art market. There was zero art market. And, you know, that's part of the vagaries of advanced capitalist society, whereby, you know, there are more rich people than there were before, which has created this art bubble. But then, you know, you can exploit that, and you can, you know, it is possible to make a living as an artist and to make a living within the art world more readily than it was when I graduated from art school. It was a very different landscape then. So,
I mean, I think sort of, I guess what I've really noticed is that I don't do a great deal of teaching, just do the odd bit here and there, but I've definitely noticed, and in a way this evening's a perfect kind of example of it, but all you guys involved in VAU, actually talking about doing this sort of off the back of our school. You know, students are much more organised. I mean, like I say, our response to graduating was just having a weep and going, Christ, what are we going to do now? I find people are much more resourceful because they need to be, and maybe leave less to chance, and are kind of more proactive. And as I was saying, grants had pretty much come to an end by the time I was sort of, I think I got a grant maybe in first year a little bit, and that was pretty much it. Loans were in, but there weren't fees to be paid, as there are in kind of other, well, depending on kind of who you are at a Scottish art school, and you pay fees or not. But I was able to somehow able to graduate with a wee bit of money in the bank and I could go off on my jollies for the summer. And I look back and I think, God, how did I manage to do that? Because I'm a really lazy person. But I just see, and I think all these things are related, as Dave says, the economics have changed and things, there are different kinds of opportunities out there, and the way that not just was there's still not a great art market in Scotland, but you're connected internationally to that, and not just the market but the general scene and sort of opportunities. The great thing that comes out of being involved with something like Transmission is that you find yourself alongside your international peers and you make these connections, and they are always there, and I just think students or recent graduates now are much better at exploiting that. Maybe because the teaching's got a bit better in art schools, I'd like to think it's that, but also out of necessity, but also out of the fact that despite a lack of funding and kind of state support, there are still a lot of opportunities out there, and people who are serious, it'll win out. But yeah, I've got sympathy. I feel like I got lucky.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think much like what David was saying, I think you've almost got to treat it like an investment. I don't think I would make the work, or I don't think I would be where I am having not been at art school. I don't think I would have been able to, I think I would have been completely lost. So I'm always indebted to the art school, so I always think in a sense that it was a good investment for me to go. That said, I'm also in a very privileged position that my parents were able to help me out while I was there, which I know is not the case for everyone. So it's a tricky one, but I also think actually it's difficult with funding now for students, but I also think that on the flip side, actually, I think the institutions and the universities themselves are also feeling, or a lot of anyway, are feeling they're also getting kind of pinched as well. And I think there must be a lot of pressure to, for example, to take more overseas students because they'll get more money from that. So I think it's difficult on both sides, but ultimately, I know I obviously used to work in art school, but I think it's maybe not the right system for everyone, but I think ultimately for most people it is a route that's gonna help you. I do believe in it as a system. So
We didn't leave with that much debt. We both worked in pubs while we were in art school.
We're still paying back our student loan though.
Yeah,
little by little, but it's
I
not
think
like
the material fees. We paid like £100 material fee in fourth year.
Yeah.
And we were allowed access to like not unlimited supply of resin, but like so much stuff, and we just kicked the arse out of that really. I think
you kind of take for granted
they've not pursued you. They've not done
pursued you. Just get a horrible letter from the door.
You kind of take for granted of how much things actually really cost and equipment and stuff.
But I agree that I'm like hugely, you go to art school and you have that time to just sort of that freedom and stuff, so yeah.
Need to make the most of it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of opportunities for emerging artists. I feel like there's wards and bursaries and residencies, and it's just staying on top of it. And I found like when you leave that you apply for everything because you feel that you need to, but you have to sit back and kind of go
think what's going to
benefit you the most, and think I'm going to want to go here and I'll meet this, learn this skill. You've got a better chance of kind of getting it than just writing like a generic email to all of them.
What's going to benefit you as an artist and further you, like,
Thank you. So have we got any more questions then? No? Well, we'll maybe just round up then and just say thank you to all of our artists for coming in and having a chat, and thank you for coming out and supporting it, and do keep to track with what we're up to at VAU, because we want to make all our events as successful as this one. So thank you for coming out.